Okay, welcome back. Please, if you have not seen the part one of this lecture, you might not understand this part two. So I will urge you, it's better you go back and watch the part one of this lecture before you now come to this part two of this lecture. Part one finished in the time of Sultan Muhammad al-Fatih rahimahullah, whom I consider that he is the sixth caliph of Islam in the Muslim world, prophesied by Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Who is the seventh caliph? In my opinion, Allah knows best, but these are just researches made by me, which you can carry on this research to come up with a better conclusion than mine. Mine is just to make an eye-opening, is to create an awareness over this subject because of the famous hadith of the Holy Prophet والسلام, where the Prophet said, "Man whoever dies, walam ya'rifu imamu asrihi, and he does not understand or is not able to identify the imam of his time, the age that you lived in, that century, that 100 years that you lived in. Who was the imam of that age? If you don't know it, fakad mata mitatul jahiliyyah, then you have died the death of a jahiliyyah. Waliyazu billah. We seek Allah's refuge from dying this death of a jahiliyyah. Bija Sayyidina Rasulullah alayhi salatu wassalam. So that is why I'm trying to dissect this subject so that we will go back to the pages of history and study the history of this ummah in every 100 years. Who was that imam that revived the sunnah of the Holy Prophet Muhammad والسلام, and is recognized by the whole ummah of the Prophet till this day? After Sultan Muhammad al-Fatih rahimahullah, the 7th century, after Khairul Qurun, the 7th century, the Khurasani region, that is Khurasan, that is another region that is prophesied by our Prophet again, that the army of the Mahdi will emerge from this region. And a spectacular event has already taken place in that region in this our time. That is the emergence of the Talibani Emirate of Afghanistan. If America as a superpower will run out of this region, first of all, it was Russia. Russia also ran away. Secondly, it was Britain. Britain also has run away. Thirdly, just of recently here, now is America. Now America has also run away. Then without any doubt, there is a prophetic evidence protecting that region. And that is why that region becomes impenetrable, unconquerable region in the history of the world. No any superpower has conquered this region of Khorasan. And Afghanistan is the headquarters of this Khorasan. So who was that gigantic leader? Who was that spiritual master that inspired these people, that attached their hearts to the Holy Quran? The whole of that region, these are people who are 100% loyal to the Holy Quran. They name themselves after the name of Sayyidina Ali. You know, Talib is the name of Imam Ali because his father was known as Abu Talib, so the father of the student. So Ali happens to be that student of Nabi Muhammad والسلام. So this name Taliban can trace its origin back to Sayyidina Ali, who is the hero of Islam. Now we can now witness the emergence of heroes in that region of Khorasan. So without any doubt, somebody must have inspired them in that region so that they remain faithful and loyal to the Quran. Who was that gigantic saint that inspired that region? He was known as Ali al-Hujrati. He was also a descendant of the Prophet ﷺ. His father was from the descendant of Sayyidina Hassan, while his mother was from the descendant of Sayyidina al-Hussein. So he was known as a Sharifain Bahrain. That is, the two holy bloodlines of the Prophet came together, and he was the one that was born from that union. Salamullah alayhi. Aliu al-Hujrati. In my opinion, he was the Mujaddad of that era. After that time, another man has to emerge. After that era, after that 100 years, that is the 8th year, 8th century after Khairul Qurun, the world has to witness the emergence of another gigantic saint who was the revivalist of the Naqshbandiya Sufi order. He was known as Sidi Ahmad Sirhindi. He was the one that argued a lot of extreme practices that were practiced by the Sufis of that time, and even up to today. Some Sufis are still practicing those extremist practices. He was totally against the extreme practices of those so-called Sufis who does not recognize Sharia in Islam. To the extent he came to the conclusion that whoever turns away from the Sharia of Allah has committed shirk. If you turn away from the Sharia of Allah deliberately, you deliberately rejected the Sharia, you have committed shirk, because you have considered another law better than the law of Allah, Allah's law. That is shirk. Waliyazbillah. Naqshbandiya Sufi order. So he was a revivalist of the Naqshbandiya Sufi order. He was known as Sidi Ahmad Sirhind from India. Rahimahullah. In my opinion, he was the Mujaddad. He was the 8th Mujaddad of the Muslim Ummah after Khairul Qurun. The 9th Mujaddad, in my opinion, was Abu Shu'aib al-Madian in African region here. Yes, he was in Africa. He was assassinated by the Ottoman caliphs of that time, who thought that he will take power from them. The way he was growing gigantically, his followership was increasing. Those caliphs, as at that time, corruption was already entered into the Ottoman Empire. Corruption has entered into them. So they were thinking that this man could take away their power. The Ottomans, as at that time, was the major power in the Islamic world as at that time. But they felt the presence of this man to the extent they thought he was going to take away their power. So they had to spearhead his assassination. He was known as Abu Shu'aib al-Madian, rahimahullah. He was also a Gawsullah al-Azam, and also a descendant of Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And after that 100 years, we are now in the 10th century after Khairul Qurun. In this 10th century after Khairul Qurun, in my opinion, Gaibulillah, if you have a better candidate, you can produce them. But based on these evidences, this methodology that we derive from the Quran and Ahadith, if you have another methodology based on historical books that people write, no. Bring your evidences from the Quran and the Ahadith. If you can do that, we'll accept. But if you bring other people's books and tell me that this scholar is the Mujaddad, this one is the Mujaddad, and he has no any prophetic backup or prophetic recognition, I will totally reject that. In this 10th century, in my opinion, the Mujaddad, the Caliph that the Prophet prophesied in that era was Sheikh Ahmad Tijani radiallahu ta'ala anhu from Morocco. Also from the Maghrib that the Prophet was talking about here. That Maghrib region, is a region that the Prophet was talking about it numerously. In numerous ahadith, the Prophet said his light shall shift to the Maghrib, that is the Moroccan region, Morocco. So Sheikh Ahmad Tijani radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was also a descendant of the Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. His father from the house of Sayyidina Hassan, while his mother was from the family of Sayyidina Hussein. The mother was from the descendants of the Sanusiya Sufi order, while the father was a descendant of Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani Wakailani. So he is also what is known as Sharifain Bahrain. And it was in this era that we, the Fulani descendants of the Sokoto Caliph, we recognize him as our Imam, because our spiritual grand spiritual master and our founder was Sheikh Usman ibn Fodio radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he recognized Sheikh Ahmad Tijani as the Imam of that era, to the extent that he urged his own son, the first Sultan of Nigeria, Sultan Muhammad Bello, to follow the Tijaniya Sufi order. And the Emir of Kanu, up till date, the Kanu Emirate is also another Tijaniya Emirate. So, according to we, the Fulani descendants of Nigeria, we recognize Sheikh Ahmad Tijani radiallahu ta'ala anhu as the Imam of that time, the Khalifa of that time, the spiritual pole of the 10th century after Khairul Qurun in Islam. That is our position, and by the grace of God, we are going to deliver subsequent lectures that will dissect the biographies of all these my candidates, and which will come to the why I came to the conclusion that they were the 12 caliphs in the history of Islam. After the era of Sheikh Ahmad Tijani radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the next century after his century was the 11th century, that's the 19th century in the Gregorian calendar, and then the 11th century after Khairul Qurun in Islam. Based on my opinion, I recognize Maulana Gausullah al-Azam Sheikh Ibrahim Inyas radiallahu ta'ala anhu to be the Khalifa prophesied by Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam in that century. And by the grace of God, we are going to come up with subsequent lectures to defend our position, why we came to that conclusion. This is not a tariqa issue, is not a Sufi issue. No, this is Islam. In fact, he won the title Sheikhul Islam, and he was awarded that title from the University of Al-Azhar, the University of Al-Azhar in Egypt, which is the till date Egypt, Al-Azhar University in Egypt remains the fountainhead of Islamic knowledge. And yet Sheikh Ibrahim Inyas radiallahu ta'ala anhu was awarded the title Sheikhul Islam radiallahu ta'ala anhu in Egypt. We are going to come to that also inshallah in our subsequent lectures. And then Sheikhul Islam, Maulana Sheikh Ibrahim Inyas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, declared in his Dawawun al-Sitt, in his Diwan, his gigantic Diwan, that he praised the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. He said, the Mujaddad that will come after him is the Mahdi alayhi salam, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. And he prayed, he made a dua that Allah should make him among those that will help the Mahdi in the spiritual realm, because he knows he will not be alive during the time of the Mahdi, but he said he prayed to Allah that he should be among his helpers. So showing clearly, we, the followers of Sheikhul Islam Alhaji Ibrahim Inyas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, this is a clear indication that no any Mujaddid will come after Sheikh Ibrahim Inyas except the Mahdi alayhi salam. And that is why we are now preparing our hearts, our soul, our whole body, our everything for the emergence of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. May Allah make us among his rightly guided followers. May Allah not make us among the extreme followers of the Mahdi. No, Ya Rabbi, make us among the rightly guided followers who shall remain faithful and loyal to him in all ramifications, both in these lives and the hereafter. Ya Allah, make even our families, our relatives, our entire generation to be from among the people of the Mahdi alayhi salam, and bless us with his blessings, guide us with his guidance, help us with his help, equip us with his equipment, and make us rightly guided leaders of the Ummah of Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب ربنا واجعلنا مسلمين لك ومن ذريتنا أمة مسلمة لك وأرنا مناسكنا وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار توفنا المسلمين والحقنا بالصالحين اللهم ارزقنا عند وفاتنا بقول لا إله إلا الله سيدنا محمد رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام.